They don't control you by force. They do it by knowing you too well. They read your pauses, your tone, the way your confidence flickers when you doubt yourself. They watch, they listen, and they learn where your mind bends. By the time you notice, they already know what breaks you. Manipulation begins not when they speak, but when they see the parts of you you've never faced. They never strike at random. Manipulators study people like quiet predators, not through education or theory, but through observation sharpened by need. They don't need to be intelligent to be dangerous. They only need to be patient. They watch how someone speaks, how long they hold eye contact, what makes their voice tremble, where their confidence falters. They sense what kind of validation a person craves and what kind of silence terrifies them. To them, every hesitation is a confession. Every reaction is a code. Most people reveal their emotional patterns unconsciously. They show when they're hurt by tone alone, when their body tenses in conversation, when they rush to please, or when they defend themselves too quickly. A manipulator collects these small signals like a thief memorizing a house's layout before returning at night. They know the locks to test and the weak door hinges to press. What they seek is not love or friendship, it's leverage. It begins with empathy that feels comforting. They listen deeply, ask about your pain, connect through shared experiences. They make you feel seen. That's the first step. To control someone, you must first make them feel safe enough to open their emotional armor. Once they speak their secrets, the map is drawn. What hurts them, what they long for, what they fear losing. Everything becomes a tool. People think manipulation is about lies, but it's not. Lies are crude. The best manipulators use truth selectively. They give just enough honesty to appear trustworthy, then slowly alter how you interpret your reality. They don't change facts, they change meanings. One by one, they shift your emotional reactions. You start doubting your own instincts. They plant subtle seeds. A half smile after you share something vulnerable, a small pause when you talk about your values, an unexpected compliment after a disagreement. Each gesture teaches you that their approval defines your worth. When you meet someone skilled in psychological reading, you feel drawn without knowing why. That pull isn't chemistry, it's calibration. They've adjusted themselves to mirror your emotional rhythm. They match your speech, your humor, your frustrations. You think you've found someone who understands you. In truth, they've only reflected what you've already revealed. Manipulators are emotional mirrors that show you the version of yourself you most wish to be seen as: strong, kind, intelligent, unique. Once you believe that reflection is real, you'll defend it at any cost. The mind craves validation more than truth. It wants to be known. It wants comfort over clarity. Manipulators exploit that craving. They sense whether you respond to authority or tenderness, whether you need rescue or recognition. They can detect loneliness beneath strength, pride beneath insecurity, guilt beneath politeness. Every word you say exposes more than you intend. To a trained manipulator, even silence is a confession. Think of how people naturally reveal hierarchy. Some speak softly around confidence. Some fill pauses with nervous laughter. Others overshare to prevent rejection. All of it becomes data. Manipulators process this without conscious thought. They read vulnerability as easily as others read language. They don't hear what you say, they hear why you said it. There's a strange psychology at play. The very traits that make someone empathetic or open are the same ones that expose them. Emotional honesty, generosity, forgiveness. All of them are admirable, but to a predator, they signal opportunity. To manipulate effectively, one must first understand pain, and many manipulators have lived in it. Their awareness of emotional weakness often comes from personal suffering. They learned how to read others because they once needed to predict cruelty to survive it. Pain taught them perception. Now they use that perception to control rather than to heal. They don't attack immediately. They wait until they're sure of their target's psychological structure. Then they begin small. A bit of guilt, a reminder of past favors, a quiet dismissal of their target's boundaries disguised as affection. They measure reactions carefully. If you resist, they apologize and retreat, only to return with deeper precision. Each exchange reshapes the emotional field until you begin accepting what once made you uncomfortable. They rewrite your limits slowly enough that you don't notice they're gone. What makes manipulation so effective is that it hides behind the illusion of choice. You think you're acting freely, but your options have been framed to guide you toward the outcome they want. They never tell you what to do directly. They make you want to do it. They plant emotional associations that tie your self-worth to their approval. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What would please them?" Psychological manipulation thrives in gray areas, never in absolutes. It doesn't demand obedience through fear, but through affection and confusion. It makes you dependent on emotional highs and lows, cycles of approval and withdrawal. The moment you feel distant from them, they return with warmth, and your brain rewards the relief as love. The same mechanism that forms addiction fuels attachment to manipulators. They keep you trapped in a loop of anxiety and comfort until your emotions serve their rhythm instead of your own. The deeper trick lies in how they justify control. They frame it as guidance, concern, or protection. They'll say, "I just care about you. I know what's best. You're overreacting." Each phrase sounds rational, yet it implies that your perception cannot be trusted. Over time, this erodes confidence until even your anger feels misplaced. You start policing your own emotions before they have to. They don't need to silence you, you silence yourself. At that point, the manipulator doesn't just control your actions. They control your sense of reality. That's the highest form of psychological dominance, to shape another person's understanding of truth. When that happens, even freedom feels wrong because dependence becomes familiar. People rarely escape because they believe they chose to stay. Part of why manipulation works so effectively is that people underestimate how much of their identity is built on seeking connection. Every individual longs to be understood, even if it means surrendering to someone who uses that understanding against them. The manipulator reads this need as easily as a musician reads rhythm. They play emotions like notes, knowing which ones create loyalty, guilt, or fear. What looks like cruelty from the outside often feels like safety from within. Victims defend their manipulators because the relationship fulfills an emotional function: validation, belonging, or meaning. Breaking free requires more than distance. It requires facing the truth that the comfort was false, and the connection was built to enslave. This is the paradox of manipulation. It's never just about control. It's about belief, shaping another's inner world so completely that they begin to distrust their own strength. The manipulator studies, learns, and mirrors until they know exactly which part of you will obey when love and fear are mixed together. And once they find that part, they never have to ask for power again. You give it willingly. Once they know where your walls are, they start to decorate them. They make you believe those walls protect you, when in truth, they're built from your own doubts. The manipulator feeds them quietly. They say things that sound harmless but carry small infections, sentences meant to stick. You're too sensitive. You think too much. You always get things wrong. Each word drips slow, not to destroy you instantly, but to soften your certainty. Over time, those phrases stop sounding like opinions. They start sounding like your own thoughts. Control doesn't always come through shouting or threats. The most effective control comes through internalization. They don't need to convince you that they're right. They just need to make you question if you ever were. The moment self-doubt becomes your default state, they no longer have to pull strings. You hold them for them. They've turned your mind into a self-sustaining mechanism of obedience. This kind of manipulation thrives in subtle repetition. Small inconsistencies, unpredictable warmth, and occasional cruelty create emotional imbalance. You begin to crave stability, but the only person who can restore it is the same one who destabilized it. They condition your nervous system to associate their attention with relief. That relief becomes a drug. It dulls awareness and blurs boundaries. The more dependent you grow, the less you remember how peace felt before they arrived. The psychological architecture behind this is ancient. Humans bond through emotion, not logic. The manipulator understands this instinctively. They don't argue facts, they rewrite feelings. They know guilt binds tighter than loyalty, and fear lasts longer than trust. So they plant emotions rather than instructions. They'll make you feel guilty for small acts of independence, then proud when you return to submission. It's not training in the conscious sense. It's conditioning disguised as connection. When they sense resistance, they change form. They can become victims to evoke pity, martyrs to trigger guilt, or heroes to inspire loyalty. They don't care which emotion binds you, as long as one does. Every reaction you show teaches them what to use next. They are emotional scientists running experiments on your psyche, and you, unaware, provide all the data they need. Their intuition is fine, tuned to weakness, because they survive through adaptation. They read micro-expressions, vocal tone, posture, hesitation. They know when you start hiding thoughts, when your smile turns forced, when your boundaries weaken. Each detail becomes a signal. Where most people see conversation, they see access points. Where others feel empathy, they feel opportunity. The hardest truth is that manipulation doesn't require genius. It requires attention. And most people are too distracted to notice the quiet observers around them. The ones who never reveal much, who listen more than they speak, who test your reactions instead of joining them. Their silence isn't politeness, it's reconnaissance. They're learning your emotional language so they can later rewrite it. Once inside your psyche, they start redefining words. Respect becomes obedience. Love becomes dependency. Honesty becomes confession. Forgiveness becomes surrender. Through language, they reshape morality itself. You start feeling guilty for setting boundaries and proud for tolerating disrespect. The manipulator doesn't take power by force. They redefine what power means until submission feels noble. The psychological weakness they exploit most often is the desire for belonging. No one wants to feel replaceable. Manipulators weaponize that desire. They make you believe your worth depends on staying in their orbit. They suggest that no one else could understand you, that your connection is rare, maybe even sacred. Once that belief takes root, isolation follows. You withdraw from others, not because they push you away, but because you think only this person truly gets you. In that isolation, control becomes total. Even when their behavior grows cruel, victims defend them. They say, "You don't know them like I do," or "They're just hurt." That's the mind trying to preserve its belief in meaning. To accept manipulation is to admit betrayal, not just from another, but from your own instincts. Most people would rather believe in the illusion of care than face the humiliation of being used. The manipulator depends on that denial. They know truth hurts more than control does. Breaking free from psychological dominance requires something terrifying: self-confrontation. You must face why the manipulation worked. You must see the weakness they exploited, the need for approval, the fear of abandonment, the craving for love that overpowered reason. It's not about blaming yourself. It's about reclaiming what was taken through awareness. The manipulator's greatest victory is convincing you that you were powerless. But power was never gone. It was redirected. People often wonder how manipulators detect fragility so easily. The answer is simple. Pain recognizes pain. Those who manipulate often carry unhealed wounds. They understand fear because they've lived in it. They understand shame because it shaped them. But instead of confronting it, they externalize it. Controlling others becomes a way to silence their own helplessness. They destroy others to feel stable. They break others to feel whole. That doesn't make them victims. It makes them dangerous. Because a person who refuses to face their own darkness will always seek to project it onto someone else. They'll use empathy as a weapon, intellect as armor, and charm as camouflage. You won't see them coming because they don't see themselves clearly either. They believe their manipulation is justified, that they're protecting, guiding, or correcting. Their self-deception makes them convincing even to themselves. The real danger is not what they do to you, but what they awaken within you. When someone manipulates your perception, they force you to see the fragility of your own mind. You realize how easily truth bends under emotional pressure, how quickly love can replace logic, how identity itself can dissolve in the pursuit of validation. It's horrifying because it reveals that anyone can be controlled if the right buttons are pressed. The manipulator just happens to know which ones to touch and when. To defend yourself, you must first accept that weakness exists. Denial is the manipulator's best friend. Awareness, however, breaks the spell. When you recognize emotional triggers, when you understand your patterns of guilt and fear, you become unreadable. The manipulator loses their script. They cannot mirror what you refuse to project. Emotional control is not about suppressing feeling. It's about recognizing the signals before they become instructions. Freedom isn't found in avoiding manipulators, but in dismantling the hooks they use. The need to be right, loved, admired, saved. These are the entry points. The less you depend on others to define your worth, the harder you are to read. You don't have to be cold or unkind, only aware. Awareness is silent armor. It doesn't block connection, it filters illusion. The mind that knows itself cannot be rewritten easily. It questions charm. It notices flattery that comes too soon, sympathy that feels staged, guilt that appears after disagreement. It doesn't react instantly, it observes. That moment of pause, that small distance between stimulus and response, is where freedom lives. Manipulators cannot survive in that pause. They thrive only in reaction. When you no longer chase approval, manipulation fails. When you value truth over comfort, control loses power. When you accept your own flaws, guilt cannot be used against you. The manipulator's greatest fear is someone who sees them clearly, not as a monster, but as empty, because manipulation hides a void. It's not power, it's desperation disguised as mastery. Once you see that, their control crumbles. In the end, manipulation is a mirror. It shows you what parts of yourself you've neglected. It exposes the unguarded corners of your psyche, the ones that crave validation, that fear rejection, that long to be seen. Once those parts are understood, they stop being doors for others to enter. They become known territory, guarded not by walls but by awareness. The truth is, manipulators know your weaknesses because they are echoes of their own. They study others to avoid studying themselves. They control others to feel less helpless. But in that cycle, they become slaves to the very emotions they try to master. Their life becomes an endless pursuit of dominance, never peace. So, how do manipulators know? They know because they watch, they feel, they adapt, and most of all, because most people never hide what hurts them. They speak it in tone, in eyes, in silence. To the manipulator, that's all they need. To you, awareness is all you need back. Once you see the mechanism, the spell breaks. And the moment you stop being readable, you stop being controlled.